Morning. We start with our own Mangala and then Vishranti, because after celebration you always need some Vishranti. Pirunam. Vijnāna Bhairava Kantasya hetustatu Hritani pratitascha piramarucham Ishuntakasya Pirambayati asvayoginivas Tasya Prabhu Bhairavo Vishvasmin Paranadikrit Vijayati Vijñāna Bhairava. Vishwanti. Vishwanti Paramadivi Kalopati Vivachita Savikalpa Vikalpana Sarvasam Samvidalaya. Why there's so much distance today? Is it? Close. After celebration, we should come back to concentration and to as much silence as we can afford in these 2 days. Let me just announce, so you have an idea about the time schedule. Today we have the full time, and tomorrow I have heard that Swami Veda is maybe going to teach tomorrow afternoon, but we have to get it confirmed. And we end tomorrow evening. So now 26th is actually departure day or whatever, but the teaching ends tomorrow. And then I have a request, and that we can talk about it in the afternoon, but I'm already mentioning it, that at least some of you, we have a sharing session at the end, where at least some of you can express your impression, your experience, your what you're going to do with this text, and which dharana maybe has appealed to you or something. We cannot everybody, there are too many, but those who want, and at least from every language group, there should be some, Hungary and Germany and so on. So you can already think about it, and if some ideas come to your mind, you have time until tomorrow. And we will find out about Swami Veda teaching. Do you know? Not yet, no. So by afternoon we will know. I want to come back to two important verses. I don't call them dharanas, verses, but because sometimes one leaves out something important before we proceed. That very important verse 106, the perception of subject and object is common to all embodied beings, but characteristic of yogis is that they are constantly aware of this relationship. Now, traditionally, this is not a dharana. It is rather a summary statement or a statement after all these practices and experiences. What is the difference between ordinary subject-object perception, which is whether animals or human beings, they all live in that duality, and yogis. So it is not something to be practiced, but something only to be aware of. And I have found, actually I did translate that commentary, and I didn't find it. So I'm reading it, but because Kshemaraja has all these very long sentences, but to give you again the gist of what this implies, because it's really summarizing a lot of what has gone before. Kshemaraja in his commentary on the Netra Tantra. According to this principle, so what he has stated in the verse, the yogi is established in the abode of consciousness, which is Shiva. And through firm establishment in Shakti, and hence he becomes capable of absorption in him means Shiva. Tat samavesha shali. Therefore, since the world is of the nature of Shiva, when it is created in all the states of manifestation or withdrawal, nimesha unmesha dashasu, the universe consisting of the five senses, shabda, etc., being of the nature of concealing its essence of being a crystallization of consciousness, is made manifest or disappears, whether through differentiation or non-differentiation. Now, it's a very long sentence, very implied. So what it means that even the yogi, although he may be in a state of deep samadhi and so on, but even yogis have a perception of object. But on what basis and in what state of consciousness? And this state of consciousness is described here in this very dense passage. Because, and then as it comes afterwards, he has already realized that the universe is divine, and more precisely that the universe or all objectivity is nothing but a crystallization of the essence of consciousness. Chitrasya ashyana. It's a very technical and very beautiful expression. So it's nothing material, but it's a concentration, condensation of the same essence of consciousness. And that is why, whether through Veda or Abheda, he is in that state, whether differentiated or non-differentiated. So he doesn't, it's not, the yogis who are in a kind of permanent samadhi, and we know this even Patanjali criticizes, that there's Prakriti Laya, and all kinds of states are there where they are so immersed that they cannot come out, and they have no awareness anymore of the world around them. This is not the highest state. Not at all. It is a danger. The highest state is to have that awareness outside. That's why so many of these practices, what you experience within, you experience in the universe, etc. So this kind of absorption where you're lost and you cannot relate anymore to the world, to other human beings. That is not at all the goal. Not at all. But it's rather this realization that everything is pervaded with the same essence of consciousness, etc. So this, sorry for going back, but I think it was quite missing. And the other, the last we did was this famous verse 118, and that also we cannot exactly call it a dharana, because again it depends on our development of our awareness, of our subtlety, of that Shakti, that energy which is already pervading the body, starting from prana and kundalini and all that. When this state is already there, then only spontaneous experiences can lead you to enlightenment. And well, it may also happen spontaneously to somebody who is not prepared, because that is the beauty of Shaktipata. See, Shaktipata means that it can hit you any moment and in any condition. But otherwise, just sneezing doesn't help. That would have enlightened so many people. So it is not a concentration, like we had so many examples of concentrating in the first moment where it springs up, where a sensation or an emotion or anything arises. No. It just happens. It just happens. That's why the examples are very random and can be multiplied. But what is common to them is, first of all, that the mind is emptied just in a moment, at once. The mind is emptied of all other thoughts. And a state of intensity. See, I have not yet used this word. Those who know me, they must have been waiting for that. Because a lot of the practices of Vijnana Bhairava have to do with intensity. And the lack of intensity is a greater hindrance than too much intensity. That's why when he speaks about emotions, kama, krodha, lobha, moha, there's very, something very negative and very powerful, but if they are not intense, they will not lead you to that. So intensity, our great scholar, Professor Sanderson, he describes the entire spirituality as of Kashmir Śaivism, prescription of intensity. So you're not, prescription is not of being very nice and very moral and very behave well and so on, but to experience everything in its fullness and its intensity. And that is the characteristic of Bhairava, who is this Chitananda Ghana. He is always described as being an intensity of the bliss of consciousness. And if you experience that intensity, then you are with Bhairava. So these are all states of intensity. And which normally they would be, in any other yoga context, they would say, well, if you're running for life from a battlefield, that means you have this abhinivesha, you have the attachment to your life, and so it's not about that. It's not about attachment or detachment or anything. It's just about that moment of intensity. So you can, from your own experience, you can add any other such moments. Now, we recite from 119 to 124. Vastushu smayamanishu drishtedishi manastyachi svashariram niradharam kritva sarati prabhu vastuni vinyasya shanai drishtim nivadhayit Tatjnanam chitta sahitam devi shunyalayo pavit bhaktyudrekat yaktasya yadrishi jayate ati sa shakti shankaris nityam Pavati Tantata Śiva Vastvantari Vidyamani Shanai Vastu Shunyata Tamiva Manasatyatva Vidito Viprashayati Kinchit nyaya smrita shuddhi sa shuddhi shambhudarshani na shuchir dasut nirvikalpa sukhi bhavi sarvatra bhairavo bhava Samanyeshvapi gochara nachatat vyatiridena paro asti paro asti iti atvayagati. Maybe you're thinking that having reached such a high state, why does he come back again to certain practices which may have already been done and achieved and so on. But first of all, what I said about the spiritual part, that it is neither linear development nor circular, but it's a spiral. So sometimes you feel that it's the same point, it's not the same. And so a little bit more than what we have already done before. But still, I'm not saying that the Vijnāna Bhairava is a systematic text, systematic in a sequential way, systematic, as Silban has said, in the way of mystical development. And it is and I will be a little quick with dharanas which are very similar to what has already been there, because we have to reach that verse 163 until tomorrow, and there are still very, very beautiful texts ahead. Now, 119. While looking at a particular space, the mind should abandon the thought of all remembered objects, and thus making the body free from all support, the Lord reveals himself. It is about memory. About memory that if memory is focused on one particular situation, desha doesn't mean only just place, but on a particular situation which you have found yourself, and forget all the other memories, and it is very interesting, because otherwise memory would be considered a vikalpa. But remembering, and this is something very practical which I can recommend, I interpret it like this. You had, in a certain situation, suppose with your guru or with a great experience you had in certain situations, and some moment in your life which has been very important for your spiritual development. And you can go back to that moment and forget about all the other memories. And that will take you back to that state of mind or state of consciousness which you had. Because we know very well that we may have had very great experiences, but they don't last. And then why not to remember them? But to remember them again with that one-pointedness, not the whatever is around that memory, but about that. That's why he says desha, desha. You know, in Yoga Sutra also it means focusing on one situation or one place, not in the sense of a geographical place, but one situation. And this is another way of reaching a state of supportlessness, niradharam, svashariram, niradharam kritva. Because the point, what Swamiji also says, that when your mind is completely focused in that moment in the past, you completely forget about the body and the present. So, svashariram, niradharam kritva. And that you become supportless in the present. And then prasarati Prabhu, the Lord reveals himself. It's very... Now 120 is very similar to a previous one. It's again about object, looking at an object, etc. I would now skip it. And we come to the very unique and important verse 121. See, if it is a matter of realizing the divine and divinization, then why there's nothing about bhakti? So there's only one verse on bhakti. And this also, as I said, 109, it also comes very late in the text. See, it doesn't come in the beginning like many religious texts in India. This first starts with bhakti and all this emotional and so on. But here, first you have to train yourself that transformation into the divine. And then only bhakti makes sense. Otherwise it remains dualistic. Here's the devotee and here's the object of your devotion, and then it becomes very sentimental. But this verse about bhakti is so powerful. The intuitive insight which is born from intense devotion. So it's not only devotion, bhakti, but bhakti udreka. In one who is detached, viraktasya, is the very energy of Shankara. Then one becomes Shiva himself. So there are some steps in that bhakti. First of all, it has to be intense. As I said, because a bhakti which is not, devotion which is not intense will be necessarily dualistic. Then it produces a state of the mind, mati, or insight, which is the energy of Shiva. So the insight produced by intense devotion is the Shakti. So there's no bhakti without Shakti, and especially Shakti Shankari. So that state of the mind or intuitive insight which arises from not only from intense devotion but in one who is detached, viraktasya. So there was no question of detachment in the whole text. Anybody who knows about Indian spirituality, so detachment should be there somewhere. But it comes only here. And because it is the condition, detachment is the condition for this. Again, this is mutually. See, by intense devotion you become detached, and by detachment you get intense devotion. So it is connected. And only under this condition that energy is experienced, that divine energy, which is your own state of mind, mati, or your own intuitive insight. But there is a practice, nityam bhavayet. One should, I'm sorry again, my translation is not complete. Nityam bhavayet. One should constantly contemplate on that. So this is not a momentary affair, but one should constantly contemplate on that energy. Tam Shakti, Shakti Shankarim, Nityam Bhavayet. Then Shiva. Tata Shiva. See, as we had it from the very beginning, it is only through Shakti that you attain Shiva. So this is the clear result of this intensity of devotion. So it's not a very simple bhakti. And that's why he was also very careful not to bring it at the beginning, because it brings immediately a state of duality. But here it is no longer, the yogi has already become divinized. His consciousness has already been transformed into divine consciousness, as with beautiful verse 109. And then this devotion makes sense. Now, what is the place of bhakti in the Tantras and the Shaiva Agamas? Because people think that there's not much space for bhakti. Because the Vaishnavas, they are full of bhakti. You can't imagine anything without bhakti. But in the Shaiva Agamas, in the Tantras, there is bhakti, but every time of the highest order, para bhakti. Mostly it says para bhakti, supreme devotion, supreme. And even in those dialogues, we have here the dialogue between Bhairava Bhairavi, and in the other tantras also, where there's a dialogue between Shiva and Shakti, and the condition with which the Devi approaches Shiva is always one of para bhakti. It's in the other tantras which I have mentioned, para bhaktya, by supreme devotion. So I'm sorry, my translation, but is missing is Nityam Bhavayet. And in the Malini Vijayutta Tantra, the characteristics of a true guru are mentioned. It's very beautiful. And the first one is his unwavering devotion to Rudra. Well, Rudra is another name. Rudra Bhakti Sunishchala. Unwavering devotion to Shiva. So even if he has attained the highest state and has all the other characteristics, but this has to be there from beginning to end. And that is why the moment, the danger is of abhimana. If he thinks now he has reached that highest state and it's no longer why to have this bhakti, then this is the beginning of the end. So Rudra Bhakti Sunishchala is the first characteristic of a true guru. This should permanently, in that state of supreme devotion, which is the divine energy. Sa Shakti Shankari. Now, I'm sorry, but 122, I'm again skipping because it's very similar to previous practices. Although definitely it is a step higher than the previous one, but still it's very similar. Now we come to the social implications of this realization of that divine consciousness. And 123 is one of those expressions, where the Tantras are critical of the orthodox Hindu society, where this division of pure and impure, so yesterday at the beginning of every puja, apavitra, and you have to sprinkle it with water and become purified because you are not pure, etc. And the purity, impurity implied in the caste system and so on. So this is definitely reversed in the Tantras. The purity which is prescribed by people of little understanding is considered an impurity in the Śaiva system. There is neither purity nor impurity. Therefore, one who is free from such thoughts attains happiness. Kinchit. So the criticism of these Orthodox people who say, please don't touch my glass because I am a Brahmin and you are a Shudra or something. They are called people of little understanding. Kinchit. They are not very enlightened. So what they consider purity as a just very direct criticism, that is impurity in our system. It's just reversed. And ultimately there is neither, this whole duality, overcoming of duality is the theme now. The duality between pure and impure, it determines the life of a traditional Hindu from beginning to end. And this whole education and the whole family habits, etc., etc. And this is, there is neither pure nor impure. Na shuchir hi ashuchir. And that you free yourself from such thoughts and be happy. Be happy means be free from these judgments and these divisions of society and habits, etc. And this is clearly Shambhu Darshana in the Śaiva tradition. Shambhu Darshana. (124), as I say, then this overcoming of duality becomes more and more applied to the social realm, and you're coming down from that high level of realizing your own divine consciousness and so on, which is a condition for overcoming these dualities. You cannot start from overcoming these dualities unless you have already transformed yourself into that state of consciousness. And this is again beautiful, 124. Sarvatra Bhairavo Bhava Samanyeshu Apigochara Nachatat Vyatirikena Paro Asti Iti Advayagati. That state of non-duality. The reality of Bhairava is present everywhere, even in common people. This is so important, because the danger of yogis or spiritual people is that they consider themselves a class apart. Now we are the sadhakas, we are the yogis, we are the those who are. This is the most dangerous abhimana. But what about the people on the street and the chaiwala or the rickshawala or whoever it may be? What about them? Samanyeshu api. The same reality of Bhairava is in everybody. He who knows that nothing exists apart from him, nachatat vyatirikena parosti, attains the non-dual state. It's very beautiful because here you attain that state of non-duality by that pervasiveness and that openness and that Maitri Bhava, or that whatever you may call it, with anybody and everybody. Again, you have already overcome the distinction between pure and impure, and then the distinction between those who are holy and unholy, or those who are yogis and not yogis, etc. So this is so important. I have not found it in any other text like this. And the example given, I think, whether it's in Shiva Upadhyaya, the example for common people is given as the women in the village, who have nothing else to do. They have to go to fetch water from the river and they carry it on the boat in their house, and then they have to cook and to have all the household chores, etc. So those water-carrying women, they are always mentioned as the most stupid because they have nothing else in their mind, just to go and carry water from the river. So, and they are also in the divine state. So this is what the commentary says. And let me just see if it is Shiva Upadhyaya or no, he gives a number of quotations, but not this. Yes, now I know the source. It is in the Mahata Manjari by Maheshwarananda, who says that even the stupid people know him, and even those women carrying water, they know him. Him whom everybody venerates, because who would not know the Lord of energy? So even all these simple people, they also know the Lord of energy. This is Maheshwarananda Mahata Manjari, is a Shakta text from South India. It's a beautiful text, very beautiful. Advayagati. That state of non-duality, unless it is applied to human relationships, then it is only a kind of, again, another kind of duality. Duality between the realized beings and the non-realized being, and the spiritual and the non-spiritual, etc. It's another duality. And we know very well that great saints, they make no distinction. And they have friendship with all the simple people, and they don't. But this is a sign. So there is a philosophical implication also in this Bhairava Bhava, the state of Bhairava, the reality of Bhairava. That's a philosophical implications which were already implied before, because Bhairava Bhava is that true I consciousness. And that true ultimate I consciousness is in everybody. Whether they know it or they don't know it, whether they recognize, whether they have that recognition or not, non-recognition. Bhairava Bhava means that aham bhava, that pure, true I consciousness. And that is why 125 is a continuation of this. Having the same feeling towards friend and foe, remaining the same in honor and dishonor, the one who knows that Brahman is always full remains happy. Now this is of course, this comes in the Bhagavad Gita also, and in other, that equal feeling to friends and enemies, and equality in honor and dishonor. So this is one important way of samatha, of that sense of equanimity, equality, whether people are praising you or they're blaming you, to be in that state of equanimity. And the reason is beautiful. Brahmana paripurnatvat, because Brahman is always full. See what? There's nothing to add or to subtract to that fullness. This is a beautiful expression which Abhinavagupta often uses. There is nothing to add and nothing to subtract. That state of fullness is equal in everything. And knowing like this, iti jnatva sukhi bhavet. Who knows, who realizes this fullness of the divine, overcomes all this love and hatred, friend, enemy, and honor and dishonor, and all these dichotomies, which are the dichotomies of ordinary life. Yes, there are many examples. Now we didn't bring the Śiva Stotravali, but anyhow, Śiva Stotravali of Utpaladeva, he gives many examples of this overcoming of the opposite feelings, opposite relationships, etc. In the language of bhakti, in the language of poetry. It's very beautifully expressed, of his own experience. Like Swamiji quotes here one, Jayantu biha santyeti, jita biha santicha. Those who are filled with that ecstasy of devotion, whether they are victorious or they are vanquished, they laugh. Whatever happens to them, they laugh, hasanti. Because they are mad with this nectar of devotion, bhavat bhakti sudapana mata. They are maddened, they're in ecstasy with this madness of devotion. So 126 is again continuation. These are, at least they are systematically connected. One should neither feel hatred nor attachment towards anyone, being free from both attachment and hatred, in the center between both extremes, Brahman unfolds. Now here again we come to the Madhya, because which is the common theme running through the Vijnana Bhairava from beginning to end. We didn't recite. We stopped at 124. Yeah? So from 125, 6, 7. Summer, huh? 24 we have done. Yeah. 25 to 27. Samasatrau chamitricha samomanavamanayu brahmana paripurnatvat iti jnatva sukhi pade nadvesham bhavayetvapi naragam bhavayet kvachit ragadvesha vinirmukto matye brahma prasapati yata vidyam yata grahyam yatshunyam yata bhavakam tatsavam bhairavam bhavyam tadanti bhuta sambhava. Matya. The center, or this in-between, that has been the leitmotif from beginning to the end. So whether it's a center between breaths or between any state, any experience, any practice, focusing on that in between, on that center, on that gap sometimes. And here it is the center between the feelings of hatred and attachment. Raga dvesha vinirmuktau matye brahma samapati. And then by focusing on the center, one is liberated. Because all these opposite emotions, they are always binding, whether it's raga or dvesha. So being liberated from both. And that expression is beautiful. Brahma prasarpati. Prasarpati means actually it flows forth. It flows out. That how does it translate it? Brahman manifests or unfolds in that freedom from these opposite feelings. How does it do? He says there develops Brahma Bhava, or the nature of the divine consciousness. Brahma Prasarpati. He has just one word to comment, Prasarpati, Vikasati, unfolds. Brahman unfolds, expands. so that divine nature expands. Now 127. I told you in 109 that there are only 2 or 3 verses about the divine, directly addressing the divine. And this is beautiful. Again, in tune with what Bhairava answered Bhairavi in the beginning about all the negative characteristics of his nature. The unknowable, the ungraspable, the void, that which pervades even non-existence. Contemplate on all this as Bhairava. At the end, illumination will dawn. It's beautiful. If you take these 2 verses on the divine contemplation, again it is negative. There is no description. Well, in the previous one it was Sarvajñatva, Sarvakartritva, and Vyapaka. And Vyapaka, of course, also has to do with void. But the omniscience and omnipotence, you may say these are positive characteristics of Shiva, but here, even it is all in the neutral, that which is unknowable, that which is ungraspable, that which is empty, that which is void. Yet abhavagam, that which even pervades non-existence. Now this is a very high level of this philosophy, that it's not only existence but even non-existence. And that is why there are also some dharanas on abhava. I told you, concentration on absence, on the absence of something. Because he is also in the absence. And that's why this comes very close in some way to Buddhism. There is no possible objectification of the divine. You cannot objectively know him or grasp him, or because he is void and he pervades even non-existence. And all that is the bhavyan. Now here it is contemplate. Contemplate on all that as the nature of Bhairava. As Bhairava. At the end, Bodha Sambhava. Bodha, illumination, awakening. So this is really, make it the arch from the very beginning to the end, that this Bhairava is never the object of any knowing or feeling or no object of grasping, because he is the subject. He is the innermost self, the innermost I, of everybody. So that is why he can never become an object. Abhavagam. And contemplate on all this as Bhairava. So it's not easy, this negative contemplation. But that is what all mystics have done. It's in all mystical traditions. The contemplation of that which is, as he has this beautiful expression, atyaya, that which is not meditable. Atyaya. the ungraspable, unknowable. At the end of this contemplation dawns enlightenment, awakening. So it is clear what Swamiji says. This is a Shambhava state, that divine contemplation of the divine as with all its negative characteristics. Now we have only come up to 27. Then 28, 29, 30, we'll see how far we come, but we can recite up to 131. Nitya nirashray shunye yapaki kalanochiti bahyakashi manakritva nirakashan samadishit yatra yatra mano yati Tatati naiva tat kshanam parityachyana vistaya nistarangastato bhavit payasavam ravayati sarvago vyapako kili iti bhairava shaktasya santato charana chiva aham mamidam ityadi pratipatti prasangata niradhari manuyati tatyana pirana chami. It's not only the Vijnana Bhairava, but it's already in the Upanishads that the closest symbol of the all-pervading divine reality is Akasha, is empty space, is the sky, etc. So we had already several dharanas with Akasha, and Vyat, and all this car, etc. But why he adds one here? He goes still one step further. Fixing one's mind on the external space which is eternal, supportless, empty, all-pervading, and free from limitation, in this way one will be absorbed in non-space. It's very, see, even all the symbols, all the metaphors, all the similes which he used to approach that divine reality, they also have to be dropped. Even that Akasha, which you are using as a support for your meditation in the Upanishads already. But even that has to be dropped, because it's still an image. It is still a metaphor. And Nirakasha is a very powerful expression. You will land in non-space, from space to spacelessness. So that contemplation on Bhairava as unknowable, ungraspable, etc. And even when you have based your contemplation on the symbolism of space, akasha, which is eternal, supportless, empty, all-pervasive, free from limitations. Even meditating on all these characteristics, ultimately you enter into non-space. So these people who have reached a very high level of that emptiness contemplation, then suddenly there is a quantum leap into something beyond imagination, beyond metaphor, beyond simile, beyond contemplation itself. And this samavishid is, of course, the verb for this most powerful samavesha, that complete absorption which is beyond samadhi, complete absorption, complete oneness, which lands you at a level still higher than that contemplation of akasha, nirakasha, samavishid. I want to see what he says. What he says about nirakasha. Akashat nishkantam ashunyam dhamma. See, what you meditate on, that space, on that emptiness, on that, but transcending that empty space, you land in that abode of ashunya. Non-emptiness, ashunya dhamma. So, because still that emptiness, this is a problem. Also, sometimes they have a discussion with the Buddhists, that even Samdung Rinpoche was a very high Lama in the Tibetan hierarchy. And once he said, very frank, he said, well, we have made shunya into a concept. And that it makes it again something you think you have grasped it. It's not, shunya is not a concept. So unless you go to ashunya, you cannot transcend that concept as beautiful akasha, and it's all very empty, but this ashunya, more beyond that imagination of it. Space and free, all that. So sometimes he is very helpful. Ashunyam dhamma. He enters that. And this is Shakta. This is the Bhu. This is the state of energy, pure energy, Shakta. Bhu. Well, there is so much on contemplation on Shunya in the Swachanda Tantra. I've just mentioned these things because somebody who wants to go deeper, Swachanda Tantra speaks of 7 levels of Shunya, of emptiness. and which correspond to 7 stages of the spiritual experience. And so Ashunya is the highest. He doesn't quote Svachanda, but it is. So again, you remember that at every group of dharanas, or every group of one subject, at the end he comes to kind of universal statement that wherever, whenever, etc., whichever, yatra yatra manoyati, towards whichever object the mind moves, one should withdraw it from there at that very moment. By thus leaving it without support, one will become free from mental agitation. So this is very, this is again a practice. Swamiji says it begins with Shaktopaya and it ends in Shambhava. We had one before where wherever your mind goes, you find your satisfaction there. So that is a lower state. But this is the higher. Wherever your mind, to whichever object your mind goes, you withdraw it from there. In that very moment. And then the mind is, of course, freed from support by Tyajya Anavastitya. And one becomes Nistaranga. Now this Nistaranga is also a qualification of all the dharanas, Nistaranga means waveless, without waves, means without fluctuation. See, whatever, still in many of these practices, there's still some fluctuation of the mind. Nistaranga, waveless state. At the end he says these are all Nistaranga Upadesha, these are all instructions into the waveless state. You will get entry in the state where there are no tides, the tideless state of God consciousness, where there are no waves. Now, we come, to the definition of Bhairava. See, all the time we have been busy with Bhairava, but what is the meaning of Bhairava? And that comes in 130. The typical way of explaining a name by dissolving it in its parts and making a kind of etymology, not etymology in the linguistic sense, but analyzing it into the parts. We already had it at the very beginning when the Mangala Shloka, which we are reciting, that Virunan, that connected with fear, the one who's overcoming fear, and so it is analyzed in different ways. Bhairava is one who makes everything resound, and here he takes that verb ravayati, Bhairava. Rava is sound, who makes everything resound with fear, bhaya, and who pervades the entire universe, paranat. Vyapaka. But before it was paranat. he who utters the word Bhairava unceasingly becomes Shiva. So there was no, before there was no question of japa. But here, for the first time, uttering or meditating on the word, on the name Bhairava becomes a kind of japa. Because its characteristics by understanding also its characteristics. Now, who makes everything resound, what does it mean? That the universe is also a manifestation of sound, or there is that sound pervading the universe, and this is the whole philosophy of music, of language. It is all connected with that sound, which is, we had this anahata nada, that nada which pervades everything, and it's a very complete philosophy of the universal sound, which is the external and internal, etc. So that Ravayati. So there are different etymologies of the word name Bhairava, but he has given this one here. Abhinavagupta in the Tantra Loka, he gives a lot of explanation on Bhairava, and those of you who have a book by Jaidev Singh, he gives a long note on the different analysis of the word Bhairava. You can read that. Now yes, in the Tantra Loka, he quotes the Tantra Loka. So what he sounds constantly, Ravayati, is the great mantra of I consciousness. This is very important. The mantra of I consciousness, which is resounding in the whole universe. And then we already have the other one, that he liberates the fearful from their fear, etc. So I'm not going now into the other etymologies of Bhairava. You can read that, you find it. But here the name of Bhairava is recommended as a kind of japa. There's a very traditional method, of course, the nama japa, but it's not the usual thing. But that by reciting the name, by reciting Bhairava, you become Shiva, you become Bhairava. So this is that whole process of transformation into that which you contemplate. I think we should stop here because it is a very important point, and we will come in the afternoon to the other verse on the Divine 132. So afternoon we'll start with 131 and Yes. Yes?
By reciting Bhairava, one becomes Bhairava. Two questions. One, does this mean any name of Shiva, including a mantra? And two, is this only true when from an initiation that it has been seeded by an able mentor, an able teacher?
I am a little bit...
Number two questions.
Yes.
By reciting the name of Bhairava,
yes.
one becomes Bhairava.
Yes.
So the first question is this any name of Shiva, including seed bija syllables that are variants?
Any name?
Yeah. Does it mean mantras of Shiva as well? And second of all, is this true anytime, like reading it from a book, having it occur to you, or does it need to be an initiation from one who has experienced this for it to be, in fact, becoming Bhairava, being transformed by the name?
Well, you see, Bhairava, as I said, is, and that was already there, it is also name of that I consciousness. So it's not just a particular God or any particular form of the divine, but Bhairava means that aham bhava, that ultimate I consciousness. And so it is nothing but the entrance or the access is through this name. This is the access, but then the state attained, that divine state which is attained, is that you realize your own true I, aham. That is said in many places, you know. What is the meaning of that state of Bhairava is that true I consciousness. And in the very next verse, that I'm giving it in the afternoon, we're speaking about that aham, about that I. So why he brings this at the very end? Because it's not a question of meditating on any particular name, as you have all this nama japa and so on, but on the meaning and on the state, the Bhairava bhava, the state of Bhairava, which is the true I consciousness. I can... It gives a long commentary here.